So looking directly at the Q2 2026 earnings for Brown& Brown, their total revenues hit an incredible $1.7 billion.
Right, which is up 391 million from this exact quarter last year.
Yeah, 30.4% jump. And net income jumped 24.7% to $288 million. Their adjusted diluted EPS is sitting at $1.76.
I mean, those are the kinds of numbers that usually make retail investors just instantly hit the buy button.
Exactly. But if you actually read the fine print, the company's core underlying business actually shrank. So today, we are taking a forensic look at this Q2 earnings release from Brown & Brown, which is, a massive global insurance brokerage firm.
Yeah, we really need to look past those flashy top-line numbers today.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is to decode all the complex accounting adjustments they make. We're going to uncover the hidden costs and, honestly, the long-term risks of highly aggressive corporate expansion.
It really is a phenomenal case study because it shows why you can literally never rely solely on a headline. The story management wants to tell, and the story the balance sheet actually tells are, well, they're often in direct conflict.
They really are. So let's talk about the narrative they put front and center. I mean, $1.7 billion in a single quarter paints a picture of absolute dominance.
It does. The initial read is undeniably strong. Generating that kind of cash, especially with net income growing at nearly a 25% clip, it projects significant operational momentum.
But then you get into the reconciliation tables.
Mm-hmm.
And nestled right next to those explosive growth metrics is a totally different story. They report a metric called organic revenue. And for Q2 of 2026, their organic revenue actually decreased by 0.7%.
Right, it actually went backward.
Yeah, it went backwards. So if a company is reporting a 30.4% jump in total revenue, how is it even possible that their organic business is shrinking?
Well, to understand that contradiction, you have to look at the mechanics of how accountants actually isolate organic growth. When financial analysts calculate organic revenue, they are deliberately stripping out the impact of any new acquisitions.
So they pull out the new companies they just bought.
Exactly. Any new acquisitions, any divisions they recently sold off, and, uncontrollable external factors like foreign currency fluctuations. The whole goal is to isolate the performance of the core business.
Right, like an apples-to-apples comparison.
Yes. They want to see the exact revenue sources that were in place last year compared directly with how those same sources are performing this year.
Well, I'm looking at their reconciliation of commissions and fees table right now, and the math they use to bridge that gap is just staggering. They start with their total core commissions and fees, but then there's a specific deduction labeled acquisitions.
And how big was that deduction?
For Q2, they had to subtract $393 million from their revenue base just to calculate their organic revenue.
Which means they effectively bought $393 million of revenue in a single quarter.
Yeah. It's essentially like a retail chain bragging that their overall sales doubled, but they casually leave out the fact that they just bought their biggest competitor's stores and slapped a new logo on them.
That's a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
Because if you look at their same-store sales, the stores they actually owned last year, fewer people are walking through the doors. The original footprint didn't grow at all.
Right, and you have to remember, that $1.7 billion is actual cash coming into the business. So the top-line growth is factually true. But if you are trying to gauge the operational health of the enterprise, that 30.4% figure really obscures the underlying reality.
Because when you strip that $393 million of acquired revenue away, the core brokerage business actually generated slightly less revenue than it did last year.
Exactly. If you're looking at this balance sheet trying to gauge long-term health, understanding the difference between total and organic revenue is, well, it's your absolute best tool.
Total revenue tells you how much scale a company's buying, right?
Yeah, and organic revenue tells you how effectively they are running their core operations. If a company relies heavily on its checkbook to show growth, it can easily mask a situation where their original services are they're no longer naturally attracting new clients.
Or they can't command higher prices anymore, which forces us to look really closely at what they're actually buying. Because growth by acquisition is fundamentally different from internal growth.
Oh, absolutely. It brings a tremendous amount of structural friction.
And that friction is glaringly obvious in the fine print here. Reading through the source material, there's one acquisition that just dominates the report. It's RSC Topco Incorporated, which they refer to as Accession.
Right, Accession. That's the newly acquired entity driving that massive $393 million revenue adjustment.
Yeah, but the financial maneuvers required to swallow a company of this size, I mean, they are severe. The report includes a line item specifically for acquisition and integration costs.
And those get expensive fast.
Very fast. In Q2 alone, those costs were $31 million. For the first 6 months of 2026, they spent $57 million just on the logistics of pulling this merger together.
To understand why those costs are so incredibly high, think of a major corporate acquisition like a medical organ transplant. The acquiring company is the host body, and the new acquisition is the donor organ.
Okay, I like that analogy.
The host body has to expend an immense amount of energy and resources, which in this case is capital, just to prevent the system from rejecting the new addition. The text actually explicitly outlines what these integration costs entail.
Right, they are paying out heavy severance packages for redundant employees, right? The ones let go during the merger.
Exactly. And they are spending millions migrating data from Accession's legacy IT systems into Brown & Brown's infrastructure. They're breaking commercial leases on overlapping office spaces. I mean, the friction of assimilation is incredibly expensive.
And it fundamentally alters their capital structure, too. At the end of 2025, Brown & Brown's long-term debt sat at $6.89 billion. But by the end of Q2 2026, after absorbing Accession, that debt ballooned to $7.34 billion.
Wow.
Yeah, they took on roughly $450 million in new debt in just 6 months.
And we can see the immediate consequence of that leverage right in their cash flow. Because they financed this aggressive expansion with debt, their interest expense for Q2 nearly doubled year over year.
Wait, it doubled?
Yeah, it jumped from $51 million in Q2 of 2025 to $100 million in Q2 of 2026.
That is insane. $100 million diverted from the business just to service the debt in a single quarter.
Right.
Which actually brings up a very confusing point about their profitability metrics. The report leans heavily on an acronym, EBITDAC. And their EBITDAC margin adjusted dropped from 36.7% down to 35.7%.
Yeah, margin compression.
But the entire premise of buying a major competitor and scaling up is to achieve economies of scale, right? You consolidate the back office, you merge the software, and your profit margins are supposed to expand. Why are their margins shrinking?
Well, first, we need to decode that acronym because EBITDAC is a heavily engineered metric. It stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, and change in earnout payables.
Wait, hold on. Change in earnout payables. Does that mean they are excluding the bonuses they owe to the executives of the companies they just bought?
Yes, exactly. It is a non-GAAP metric, meaning it doesn't conform to generally accepted accounting principles. Management teams use metrics like EBITDAC to present what they consider their, core operational profitability.
So they're stripping out the heavy accounting noise of depreciation.
Right, and the financing costs of their debt. But the critical takeaway here is that even after excluding all of those burdensome costs, even after pulling that massive interest expense out of the equation entirely, their adjusted margins still compressed by a full percentage point.
So if it isn't the debt service dragging down that adjusted margin, what is the actual mechanical cause of that inefficiency?
It goes right back to that transplant analogy. When you buy a giant entity like Accession, you inherit all of their operational inefficiencies on day one, well before you have the chance to achieve any actual synergy.
Oh, I see. So you might be running 2 entirely different enterprise software systems simultaneously.
Exactly. Paying double the licensing fees while your consultants try to merge the databases. You have bridging finance costs. You are maintaining duplicate management structures before the severance phases are totally complete.
So the margin compression basically proves that bolting on acquired revenue is just inherently inefficient in the short term.
Right. You are buying top-line growth at the direct expense of bottom-line efficiency.
Which puts an incredible amount of pressure on the core business to perform.
Yeah.
But, as we already established, the core organic business shrank by 0.7%.
It did.
However, the report contains a very strange anomaly here. They note that organic revenue with contingents managed to grow by 0.7%. So they have this specific carve-out that flips the narrative from a slight contraction to a slight expansion. What exactly is a contingent in this context?
The source text defines them as profit-sharing contingent commissions. To really grasp how these work, you have to understand the principal-agent dynamic in insurance.
Okay, break that down for us.
So Brown & Brown is a broker, right? They are the agent. They do not hold the actual risks of the policies they sell. If a client's warehouse burns down, the insurance carrier pays the claim, not Brown & Brown.
Right. The broker simply takes a base commission for facilitating the sale.
Correct. But carriers want to incentivize brokers to bring them safe, low-risk clients. So they offer a back-end bonus, a contingent commission.
A bonus for bringing in good risks.
Exactly. If the portfolio of clients that Brown & Brown places with a specific carrier ends up being highly profitable, meaning those clients filed very few claims over the year, the carrier shares a percentage of that underwriting profit with the broker.
Hold on. If their organic revenue without these bonuses is shrinking, that means their base commissions, the predictable fees they earn just for doing their job, are declining.
Yes, they are.
So they are entirely reliant on these back-end profit-sharing bonuses to show any organic growth whatsoever. Isn't that an incredibly precarious position? I mean, you are relying on your clients not getting into accidents or having their properties damaged just to hit your quarterly growth targets.
It is a profound structural vulnerability. You are no longer just forecasting your own sales ability, you are forecasting probability and luck. And honestly, management is fully aware of this exposure.
They have to be.
Yeah. In the forward-looking statements of the release, they explicitly warn that these contingent commissions are highly susceptible to the effects of natural disasters.
Because a single major weather event could wipe out the carrier's profit margin for the entire region.
Exactly. Say a severe hurricane makes landfall in a state where Brown & Brown has placed a large volume of property insurance. The resulting flood of claims destroys the profitability of that specific portfolio.
And the carrier makes no profit.
Right, which means the contingent commission to the broker drops to zero. Relying on weather-dependent bonuses to prop up your organic growth means you are building your financial foundation on highly unpredictable variables.
That makes the underlying health of the business look even more fragile. And, speaking of fragility, there's another highly unusual disclosure buried in their organic revenue reconciliation table.
The litigation charge.
Yes. They took an $18 million hit in Q2 for a litigation-related impact. And seeing a litigation charge carved out so specifically in an earnings table usually means there's a significant story behind it.
Oh, absolutely. It is very rare to see litigation separated out in the organic revenue reconciliation itself rather than just buried in general administrative expenses.
Right. So what does the text say about it?
The text reveals the mechanics behind this $18 million loss. It is tied directly to lost customer accounts and new business generated by former employees who departed for a competitor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Brown & Brown is currently litigating against that competitor in multiple jurisdictions.
So if we read between the lines of the legalese here, a group of their brokers left the firm, went to a rival, and basically managed to take $18 million worth of client revenue out the door with them.
That's exactly what happened.
But I thought large brokerages relied on non-compete clauses and, corporate branding to prevent exactly this kind of client exodus. Why is the business so portable?
Because in the commercial insurance sector, the corporate logo on the letterhead is really secondary to the individual relationship. Complex commercial insurance requires a deep understanding of a client's specific operational risks.
So it's very personalized.
Incredibly personalized. The client trusts the individual broker who has managed their account for a decade. If that star broker leaves for a rival firm, the client often follows the broker, regardless of the non-compete agreements the corporation tries to enforce in court.
Which completely explains why they had to highlight this $18 million impact. It basically proves that a substantial portion of their revenue isn't sticky to the Brown & Brown brand at all. It's tied directly to the human beings walking the halls.
And when you realize how dependent they are on individual human relationships to maintain their revenue, the warnings they issue about the future take on a much darker tone.
Yeah, let's look at those warnings. In the main press release, CEO J. Powell Brown offers a very standard, optimistic quote. He says, "We have great momentum as we head into the back half of the year."
Classic CEO optimism.
Right. But if you scroll down to the forward-looking statements, which is the legal disclaimer section, where a company must disclose its existential threats to the SEC and investors, the landscape is literally littered with landmines.
The forward-looking statement section is essentially a roadmap of management's deepest anxieties. It's drafted by corporate counsel to protect the company from lawsuits if things go wrong, so it highlights the exact mechanisms that could derail their business model.
And the threats listed here are severe. They explicitly warn about the risk of rapid technological change. They specifically cite the increasing use of artificial intelligence and robotic processing automation.
Yeah, and they also highlight the threat of disintermediation by technology companies.
Disintermediation. That word is the key to understanding their anxiety, isn't it?
Yeah.
It describes the process of cutting the middleman out of a transaction.
Precisely. And a brokerage firm is, by definition, the middleman. They sit directly between the business buying the insurance and the carrier providing the policy.
Right. Their entire revenue model, collecting, say, a 10% or 15% commission on a policy, is predicated on the idea that commercial insurance is just too complex for the buyer to navigate directly with the carrier.
Yes. The human broker assesses the risk, structures the policy, and negotiates the terms. But what happens to that model when a technology company builds an AI platform that allows a business to upload its operational data, instantly assess its own risk profile, and purchase a customized policy directly from a carrier's automated underwriting system?
It completely circumvents the broker. If an artificial intelligence can do the complex risk assessment instantly without requiring a massive commission to fund its salary, the traditional brokerage model is facing a catastrophic pricing disadvantage.
It really is.
And this creates a fascinating tension in this earnings report. I mean, they are warning investors that AI and automation could cut them out of the transaction entirely. Yet, their strategic response in Q2 was to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire Accession, another traditional human-intensive brokerage.
It's a paradox, isn't it?
It's crazy. They are doubling down on a legacy business model at the exact moment technology threatens to automate it.
And they are doing so while heavily restricting their own financial maneuverability. Remember that long-term debt ballooned to $7.34 billion. The forward-looking statements also explicitly warn that the covenants on their debt could restrict them from engaging in beneficial activities.
Wait, what does that actually mean in practice? How do debt covenants stop them from pivoting?
Well, when banks lend a company $7.3 billion, they attach strict rules or covenants to ensure they get paid back. These rules often cap how much more money the company can borrow or dictate how much cash they must keep on hand relative to their debt.
I see.
So if Brown & Brown suddenly realizes they need to spend $1 billion developing their own proprietary AI platform to survive this technological shift, their lenders might step in and say, no, your debt-to-EBITDA ratio is already too high from buying Accession. You are not allowed to fund that project.
Wow. So their aggressive M&A strategy is not just expensive, it might actually be locking them into a rigid structure, just as the industry requires ultimate agility. They're carrying a $100 million quarterly interest anchor while trying to outmaneuver agile tech startups.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this 10-page report. When you look past the initial 30.4% top-line growth figure, the mechanical reality of their financials is intensely complicated.
We really have a company telling two completely different stories here. I mean, the headline metrics project a juggernaut $1.7 billion in revenue, growing profits, aggressive expansion.
Right, but beneath the surface, the core organic business is essentially flat.
And entirely dependent on weather-permitting bonuses. Plus, they are bleeding $18 million to former employees who took their clients. They are suffering from margin compression due to the immense friction of integrating these massive new acquisitions.
Yeah, and they have leveraged their balance sheet with over $7.3 billion in debt, which is eating up $100 million in interest every single quarter.
It is a brilliant demonstration of why reading the reconciliation tables is mandatory for you as an investor. You have to understand how a company defines its organic growth, and you really have to isolate the true cost of the revenue they're basically just buying.
Absolutely.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the underlying mechanics of Brown & Brown's Q2, I want to leave you with one final thread to pull on. The source text makes a point to highlight their legacy. They note that since 1939, they have built a network of more than 23,000 professionals globally, all dedicated to delivering customized insurance solutions.
It is a vast empire, and it's built entirely on human relationships and specialized knowledge.
But as their own legal disclosures explicitly warn, the landscape is rapidly shifting toward artificial intelligence and robotic processing automation technologies designed specifically to replace that human element.
Which is the big elephant in the room.
Exactly, which raises an existential question for you to ponder. In a near future where an AI platform can instantly ingest a company's data, analyze the probability of loss, and perfectly customize complex commercial insurance risk without ever needing a salary, a severance package, or a 15% commission, will an army of 23,000 human brokers be seen as an insurmountable competitive moat or an incredibly expensive relic of the past?
It's a great question.
It really is. That's all for today's deep dive. Make sure you follow the show for daily earnings coverage, and we'll catch you next time.